Hey guys, Miss Bracken here. Thanks for coming and logging on to do your work today. If you are stressed out by the amount of reading today, hopefully I can ease that stress a little bit and you can follow along as I read out loud to you. As you know, we just finished our unit on colonialism, so it's time to move forward a little bit and figure out how some of these African and Asian nations began their road to independence, breaking the ties from their imperialist countries. So to introduce, we're going to do some reading. Follow along with me, and hopefully you are following the directions for annotations. Those can be found in the announcement today. So without further ado, let's go. Decolonization of Africa and Asia from 1945 to 1960. Between 1945 and 1960, 36 new states in Asia and Africa achieved autonomy or outright independence from their European colonial rulers. There was no one process of decolonization. In some areas, it was peaceful and orderly. In many others, independence was achieved only after a protracted revolution. A few newly independent countries acquired stable governments almost immediately. Others were ruled by dictators or military juntas for decades, or endured long civil wars. Some European governments welcomed a new relationship with their former colonies. Others contested decolonization militarily. The process for decolonization coincided with the new Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States, and with the early development of the new United Nations. Decolonization was often affected by superpower competition and had a definite impact on the evolution of that competition. It also significantly changed the pattern of international relations in a more general sense. The creation of so many new countries, some of which occupied strategic locations, other of which possessed significant natural resources, and most of which were desperately poor, altered the composition of the United Nations and political complexity of every region of the globe. In the mid to late 19th century, the European powers colonized much of Africa and Southeast Asia. During the decades of imperialism, the industrializing powers of Europe viewed the African and Asian continents as reservoirs of raw materials, labor, and territory for future settlement. In most cases, however, significant development and European settlement in those colonies was sporadic. However, the colonies were exploited, sometimes brutally, for natural and labor resources, and sometimes even for military conscripts. In addition, the introduction of colonial rule drew arbitrary natural boundaries where none had existed before, dividing ethnic and linguistic groups and natural features, and laying the foundation for the creation of numerous states lacking geographic, linguistic, ethnic, or political affinity. The newly independent nations that emerged in the 1950s and the 1960s became an important factor in changing the balance of power within the United Nations. In 1946, there were 35 member states in the United Nations. As the newly independent nations of the Third World joined the organization, by 1970 membership had swelled to 127. These new member states had a few characteristics in common. They were non-white, with developing economies, facing internal problems that were the result of their colonial past, which sometimes put them at odds with European countries and made them suspicious of European-style governmental structures, political ideas, and economic institutions. These countries also became vocal advocates of continuing decolonization, with the result that the UN Assembly was often ahead of the Security Council on issues of self-governance and decolonization. The new nations pushed the UN toward accepting resolutions for independence for colonial states and creating a special committee on colonialism, demonstrating that even though some nations continue to struggle for independence in the eyes of the international community, the colonial era was ending. Alright guys, I hope that helped. You will need to annotate in 3 different ways, so if you need to listen to this 3 more times, that is fine. Just get the work done. I believe in you guys, and I hope you are getting through this tough time.